A lot of the times I sit in front of this camera and the way I come off, it could seem as if there is not things that I need to heal from in life, right? I know I made the video saying, I'm not the problem. And that was in response to a lot of things. And in those regards, I'm not the problem, right? But I decided that I'm gonna, do a series of videos for you guys that is going to be very transparent in the places where, you know, I still do need healing. The places where, I was hurt in life, That way you guys can better understand me, things I've gone through, things I struggle with, so on and so forth, right? Because I definitely don't want to come off as the person who, just telling everybody else what to do, and don't have no work to put in myself in certain areas of my life, right? And as always, it comes from a place of reality, so it's just things you got to deal with. Sometimes I find myself thinking about my little sister and some of the things that she's gone through in life. And I can't help but to feel sorry for her because she's repeating a cycle of the same toxic, irresponsible, and selfish behaviors that my mother did. But she's still a good 5 years away from even realizing that it's a cycle being repeated. A lot of irreparable damage is already done. My mother being attracted to the wrong type of men, having children with men who didn't prove themselves to be anything before that point, and, just having relationships with abusive men, etc. It set a template for my little sister to follow. I spoke on an earlier video of how we look at our mothers as superheroes in the Black community, right? They're so strong. They made a way from no way. They played both parents. They sacrificed so much for us. And I'm sure that there's a lot of situations where that assessment is very valid, whereas, your parents might have been married and then they later got a divorce, and your mother had to show all of that, to get you guys through your later teenage years and so on and so forth, or situations where, your mother may have been widowed at that point, your father passed away, so, I certainly don't want to denigrate these women, that had to step up in these roles, right? But for a lot of us, our mothers were just irresponsible, and it's so hard for us to grasp that reality. It's so hard because of how we feel about them. But in my sister's case, you end up with a young girl following her hero's template, and that template isn't beneficial for her growing up. For years, we've been told what was done for us and to be appreciative and be thankful for what we have based on what other kids had around the world. The kids in Africa talk. But a lot of this was being spoken to us to distract us from the inadequacies that we had and the irresponsible behavior that they displayed, the having kids without means of providing for them, and even worse, having kids that you already can't provide for and bringing more kids into this world. The pushing away of good men for frivolous reasons, he too square, he not big enough down there, the keeping the children away from the fathers for reasons that don't directly correlate to the health and welfare of the child. You don't like who the father's dating, or you don't like the way the relationship ended. You're trying to hold the children as pawns for child support. The having children with multiple men, which creates a different type of toxicity in the home, because now you have, children's fathers who do more or less, for the children, So you create a situation where now it ain't the kids in Africa I have less than. I have less than my own sibling who lives with me because his father does more. He got Jordans for his birthday. He got a party at Chuck E. Cheese. I was able to have some friends come over and eat some fried chicken at the crib. A lot of women compound being irresponsible with selfishness, the having kids, by men who don't even want kids. But you get pregnant and you're going to keep it when he clearly said he didn't want a kid. Or the having children with a man because you find him physically attractive and you think that you're going to make a cute baby, and so you carry anyway. And see, we have no problem calling out the women who are our peers in these situations. Yeah, we call Brittany down the street, all kind of thoughts and garden tools and female dogs because of the way she lived her life, but her story closely resembles a lot of our mothers. I didn't judge my mother based on her finances. My judgments as it pertains to my mother were based, on a lot of other things, for one, decision making. Like, I don't understand how a woman who comes to a situation with three sons chooses to be with a drug dealing, gang banging, drunk abuser and stays with him, leaves him hella times and comes back to him hella times for a period of 13 years. I don't understand that shit. Like, but there was nothing about this man that said he's a good role model for my three young sons. She could have had somebody else. She could have chose somebody else. Selfishness is the only way that you can explain that decision. I can't see no other way. I was athletic as fuck, but I was never signed up for a sport. I was told that I couldn't play football because I was too frail. And maybe that was the case as a kid. My older brother played football, my younger brother played football, so I don't think it was a financial issue. But okay, if I can't play football, sign me up for basketball, sign me up for baseball, sign me up for something. Like, why we live right by a sports complex, where you have football fields and things like that. So when it came to going to practice, and you didn't even have to take me to practice every day. I could walk to football practice. I could walk to baseball practice. Basketball would have been something different. I probably would have had to make that walk to the Boys and Girls Club, but we made that walk a lot of times. That 4 to 5 mile walk a lot of times from my neighborhood. To go hoop on that carpet. But yeah, man, I can't play no sports. I gotta answer this door all day as dope fiend after dope fiend knock on this motherfucker. Gotta make sure that I don't wear nothing blue, or that I just don't happen to do what my older brother did and make a song with somebody who say cuz in it, because then that's gonna piss off my step pops. I can't understand how she stayed through the abuse. I watched my mom get her ass whooped from the time I was 5 years old to the time I was 17. She left this man hella times and went back to him every single time. And the only reason she didn't go back to him the last time is because he went to prison for beating her up. And this is the most conflicted I've ever felt in my life, because, I remember that day, clear as ever, and him coming in the house. And I remember my mother telling me to call the police. But because, this has happened so many times, I didn't want to just call the police. It wasn't nothing going on at the time. Obviously, she saw something in him that I didn't see in him. And I didn't want to call the police because I didn't want him resenting me after, after y'all break up, you leave and get back together. I didn't want him resenting me for calling the police on him. And so, he starts beating her up, and I call the police, and, he beat her up real bad, and, he leaves before the police get there, and the police officer comes in there and he looks at me and he's like, how come, hey man, you should have stabbed him. You should have done this, that, and the third. And so she gets out the hospital. She's all, beaten and battered. And a couple days later, we had to leave the apartment. We moved to my cousin's house, and she asked me, she said, Anthony, did you call the police when I told you to call the police? And I told her I did. It's the only time that I've ever lied to my mom in my life. And until this moment right now, nobody other than my wife knows this. Nobody knows this. I carried that with me my entire adulthood. But how the fuck was I supposed to know? It has happened so many times from the time I was 5 to that moment when I was 17. How am I supposed to know that this is going to be the time you go to the hospital? How am I supposed to know that? You left and left. There are what, 13 years of school total, kindergarten through 12, right? I went to 13 different schools throughout my time as a student. Now, some of those times was because the district switched schools, for us, or, just going from one level, elementary school to middle school or middle to high school. But a lot of those times was simply because there was no stability whatsoever in our home. We were either leaving because the lease was up for that year, or we were leaving because she was leaving him, moving in with my cousin or my auntie, getting another place, and then a month later, welcoming him back into the home. The only fucking good thing about us moving a lot was the fact that because he was a gang banger. Like, because he was this OG from this set, he had to stay near the set. So at least I was able to, for the most part, keep the same friends growing up, right? We either lived in the neighborhood or we lived close enough to the neighborhood where I could walk and go hoop with my boys. But the lowest point that I've ever felt about my mother in life was actually a couple years ago. It pisses me off because she be so in denial. She's so, dead set on keeping up this image, and acting as if everything is just okay with her, that she just won't acknowledge shit. And it pisses me off. A couple years ago, we have this big, family gathering, around the time of the year where my older brother passed. And we're at this beach or whatever, and we're having this conversation, we're reminiscing on the past, both good and bad, right? And when it comes to the topic of the extra abuse that my little brother experienced from, our stepdad, my mother fixed her mouth to say that she didn't see any of it. I could have lost my shit at that moment if I just wasn't in such a better fucking mind state at that point in life. I could have lost my shit, because it's no fucking way that you could have lived in our household and not seen the extra abuse that my little brother had to go through. The him not being able to eat some nights because he's going off on some fucking tantrum. The him, getting his ass whooped, him getting antagonized, and then getting his ass whooped based on his reaction to being antagonized. When she said that she didn't see that, I lost so much respect for my mother at that time. Because my little brother went through a fucking lot. He went through a fucking lot. That nigga's a soldier. My little brother. And it's no fucking, no shit that he lives in Maine now. And he's lived in Maine for the last fucking damn near 10 years. He couldn't get far enough away from Las Vegas, Nevada. He literally went to the furthest place that he could be from Las Vegas, Nevada, in the United States. Because Las Vegas, it can't be fond memories for him. It can't be. He's thriving, married with a child, got him a little son that just over a year old, looks just like him. My little brother, man, I'll say somebody, my motherfucking hero, it's my little brother. I'll tell you that right motherfucking now. And let me make it clear, man. This is not me playing a victim. This is not woe is me. This is me just speaking my experience, being transparent with you guys, letting you guys know why I am so passionate about the issues that I speak about. It's because I fucking lived them. I didn't go to school and study nothing, and this isn't me speaking from somebody. I fucking lived the shit. So when me and my wife get calls today from my sister, I see the direct correlation to what she's going through to what my mother went through. And see, it's tough for my little sister because that's actually her father doing the abusing to my mother. So what, as a little girl, if you are seeing your father abuse your mother, put his hands on her, and then, you see your mother leave, but then your father's back, they get back together, what the fuck are you going to do? What is your mind state going to be by the time you become a young woman? Oh, that's just the way it's supposed to be. So, when her boyfriend was putting his hands on her and so on and so forth, and she keep going back, I stopped responding. But I understand why she's doing it, because she thinks it's natural. She thinks that's the way it's supposed to go because that was her mother and her father's relationship. That's what she's seeing. Me and my mother had to talk about that too a week ago. My mother thinks it's because, some women are just attracted to sex like that. So, it's the sex keeping her. No, she thinks that's fucking natural because that's what you saw. But it's sad because she has a daughter with the same fucking man. What is she gonna think? The cycle just continues. And when it comes to my sister, like, that's the saddest part. Because when I look at my mother, my wife's mother, my friends' mothers, like, we're talking 7 or 8 women, and only one of them had their shit together, and only one other, lives a somewhat decent life. Like, the rest of them, they don't have a decent apartment, a decent car, a decent anything between them. They have negative net worths. They own nothing but debt. You would think that the older your children get, and when your children get grown, that you'd have the ability to, improve your life, attain more, do more things, bring some type of stability to your life. The boys in the hood mom, right? You got to go stay with your dad so I can get myself together. And then you come back and stay with me when I get myself together. You would think that's the way it goes. They don't own anything. And it don't bring me any pleasure to bring this to the forefront. But if we don't call shit for what the fuck it is, we likely to see generation after generation after generation repeat the same cycles. Shit has to be called for what it is. Listen, man, I hope some of you guys can see yourself through this video, and make the necessary corrections to both how you see your mother and how you raise your children, because repeating that same action over and over and expecting a different result, well, we know what that defines.